Okay, we'll begin the meeting. Recording just started. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the November 2nd meeting. Does anyone want those read or reviewed?
I move that we dispense with the reading and approve them as written.
I'll second that.
Okay, 1 second. Sadie, 1 second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. All in favor. All right, we'll take care of the minutes from the last one. The second item on the agenda is to review the status of the 10 items that I knew of that were left open as of the last meeting, and I had circulated all this by email. It's not changed. I was looking at email traffic since I got home yesterday, and I know of at least half of these that are now complete. In fact, I made no releases. So there's only 4 or 5 of these even to talk about. For example, item 1, Ryan Porter's action, that's complete. He's gotten the quotes for servers and give those numbers to Gary Ann, and she put them in the spreadsheet that she sent us all yesterday. So item 1 is complete. Item 2, Bob Cushman. We were supposed to get an answer on whether the truck lift could be repaired, was to be repaired, or had to be, or if we had to spend $90,000 to buy a new one. The answer was.
Oh, good.
It was.
Nick of time, right at the exact right moment.
All right. Question for me.
Well, it's the truck lift. Was it going to be repairable, or were we going to have to plan to buy a new one?
No, I think we're gonna be repairable.
Okay. Repairable.
Like that.
We're using it as it
Absolutely.
is. So
Pardon me?
we're
Yeah,
actually
sure.
using it right
Good,
now.
good.
It
Works.
has some
All right.
hiccups, but we're getting by.
The next action was Tammy Ann's, to update the projected cost, and I believe that's complete.
All right, well, can we just come back to number 2? If we're not gonna put it in, are we taking it out totally, or are we just pushing it ahead in time?
Truck
Another
lift, you
year.
mean? Oh, yeah, I see. Will we need to buy a new one at some point?
To at least keep it in the view for like 2025 perhaps?
Well, I'm not,
Six?
ask these guys what they think. When would you project that it will need to be replaced? Couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, what?
I'm gonna say 5 to 10.
Really?
Yeah.
So let's do what Jack said, keep it in the view. Would you put it out maybe 5 years?
Put it 5
from now,
years out.
Please? How's that sound? Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah.
Just keep it in view. Yeah, we'll review it when the time comes. If it lasts longer, fine. Good, good. The next item again, 3, I think is complete, correct? Karen? You updated those numbers in the spreadsheet. Item 4 was the lease quote for 4 pieces of equipment, and Karen shared that with all of us by email, so that's done. Thanks, by the way, thanks to everybody for working these things while I was gone. That's great. Okay, number 5, CIP committee. Okay, need to review the large projected purchase costs. We knew it was gonna be a lot of money. We didn't know how much. I made this little cheat sheet this morning, so we'd be ready to identify for the budget committee.
A little cheat sheet. Okay.
Just a little. But there's a couple of key numbers on here. Couple of key numbers on here. Pretty good.
It's a little
I thought it would get.
Last
I
on it.
thought it would get you. Now, the bottom line here, folks, I just compared last year to this year. Now that we knew the numbers, to lease the 4 pieces of equipment that we all settled on at the last meeting. And I compared to last year. And I just, give me a second, let's just look at the total line. Last year, the total projected capital reserves savings, the amount of money we were asking the taxpayers to put into capital reserves was 421,000 and change. And in addition to that, we were proposing that they would put in for about $40,000 for a lease payment for a grader. So that would have come to $461,000 of monies, tax monies going into capital reserves in 2023. Apples and apples, the same numbers now for 2024 comes out to 818,000. Does everybody see that? That's a combination of the 648,000 of capital reserves set aside that are in Carrie Ann's spreadsheets today, plus the 107, I called it 170,000. It's 169 and change for lease payments. So that comes to 818. That's an increase in 1 year of tax monies going towards capital, heavy duty capital equipment of $356,000. It's a big number. And I just wanted to, as far as that action item 5 is concerned, for the committee to review the increase, we just want to be cognizant that that is a sizable increase. And I guess I would ask the question point blank of the committee. Is everyone comfortable with recommending a plan, this plan with that much of an increase to the budget committee and to the voters? Obviously, the voters will be asked to approve all these by warrant articles. Is this committee comfortable with recommending that plan at this point?
Can we come up with that much money?
That's a question that I personally think, I'd say to the budget committee, well, we think it's about the best plan we can come up with for the equipment we need. Now, budget committee, can you come up with that much money? I think only the budget committee can answer that question, is my opinion.
Right.
Others, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's up to us to make a recommendation based on what we have gotten from all the departments
Okay,
and what we see.
so,
Right? And we can take that and present that as our plan. This is what we think should happen. Now it's up to you, budget committee, to figure out whether or not you can pay
Can
for
we
it.
afford it?
so what is it within, I mean, a different question, and is it within the range of possibility that we can do this much?
So it doesn't actually go in the general fund budget. It'll be warrant articles outside of that.
It's the money left over from previous.
In a lot of cases,
Where-
it's up to 100%.
That's not gonna happen this year.
It didn't actually happen, maybe.
And
So.
the thought is that that's not
Where's
gonna
it
happen
gonna
this year.
come? It doesn't come from the
It
operating,
would-
but where's it gonna come
An
from?
increase
New
in
taxes.
that.
New tax-
Yeah.
new taxes.
New tax.
New taxes.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question that we probably kicked around, that if we put the lease cost as a warrant article. Does the money then get raised from the general fund or through CIP? Because
Usually through CIP. When there's a warrant article to put money into the capital reserves.
Right.
well,
In the-
it's not really going into,
It wouldn't go in.
we're gonna start spending it, and we're gonna start spending it every month.
It's gonna be an operating budget. But the only reason it was discussed in the CIP committee is because this is the transition year. And we had to decide if we were gonna even entertain the lease option.
Right.
So
And-
if we do leases, it's operating budget.
Yeah,
Oh,
and the only
on the
money
lease.
that's gonna, the only
Yes.
money that's gonna go in. Is the money that was intended to be expended in the year that you're considering.
Right, so it would be 169,000 or whatever would be what
Well, these
what would be
payments,
required for payments.
police payments,
That would
correct,
appear as a requirement out of the general funds.
correct.
Right.
Police payments, that's true, it does not go in as capital
That's
reserves.
right.
And so what's the monthly? Our cost of these,
That's 169.
The lease is 169 a year divided by 12.
Yeah.
Um,
And we would probably end up paying it once a year. Like we paid-
that was what I. Right, I remember hearing that was.
so I'm just trying to. Understand why it's even appearing in the CIP, it's gonna be a warrant article. Is annual funds. Will be raised out of the operating budget. So. And then every year afterwards for the next 7 years.
So that's a good question,
Yeah.
should the lease payments appear in the CIP? Perhaps
Because
not,
This, this seems added to CIP, but.
well, I wasn't really meaning to add CIP, I was just presenting to this committee that the net effect to the taxpayer is still the same. Taxpayer is not really gonna care that much if it's going through CIP or through general budget, it's still coming out of their pocket. That was what my purpose in creating this little chi-chi, so to speak, is.
But that
to
raises.
say,
Jim,
this
that
is the
raises-
net effect to the taxpayer. Now, should the lease payments be in the CIP plan? I might open, they don't have to be, if you think it's good visibility for the voters. So that when I write the report, we show we're gonna purchase this much and we're gonna lease this much. We can put it in there, I'm
Well, right
open
now,
to,
it's not actually in the
Discussion.
CIP plan.
well, it's sort of.
It's in as a warrant, it says below the CIP plan, right, for highway. We have, we're gonna be putting in $300,000 into the highway budget. And then there's a warrant article for something for $169,000 during the year. So it's not actually part of the CIP.
If I may,
Yes,
it's not part of the capital reserves account.
yes, correct,
But on these lines,
yeah.
it is showing in the CIP, and Kelly is putting.
Okay,
So it's being displayed. It's not capital reserves, different issue,
Yes,
but it isn't showing in the CIP plan and it's part of the total amounts of money. I kind of like it this way. I think it gives the voter visibility of all of the money being spent on this kind of equipment, both purchase and lease.
okay,
But if I'm coming in off the street
Mhm.
and I haven't been party to any of these discussions, and I look at that. I'm gonna say, wait a minute, what are you doing here? Because I don't think. Unless we can make it clear some way that the lease is not part of CIP.
Mhm.
I mean, otherwise Joe Blow is,
So if I may,
he's not gonna.
let me address that. But we're leasing equipment that is considered by the state of New Hampshire and the town as capital equipment.
Yeah.
We may not be using the capital reserves technique to fund it,
Right,
but it is capital improvement. This is our plan to improve our capital equipment. It includes some purchase and some lease, but our overall plan includes some of both. In the purchase ones, we're going to fund through the capital reserves technique. The lease ones we're gonna fund through general fund.
Well, I guess,
okay.
So it's two different techniques of funding, but it's still part of the plan to improve our capital equipment. That's what I'm thinking.
I guess
What do you think?
my point is how you present that.
Right,
How can we present it, maybe in the written part? of the
I
report.
will expound on that in the written part.
But then if it's in the written part of the report, should it be included in the
In the
graph,
spreadsheet.
in the spreadsheet? And I think not.
You think not?
Yeah.
Okay, I was kind of like, you know, Kevin had it in here. It's summary, and I would definitely need to explain it in the written report. That's my feeling. What are others think?
no, I think you're right, it has to be pointed. I have another question.
The question now, do you think it should be in here? In the spreadsheet?
Not sure yet.
Not sure yet. All right.
I'm
And
gonna-
before we move on to another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
See.
Okay, so
I don't think that we need to put the cost, the amount in there, or if we're not. Because it's just gonna skew the numbers at the bottom, so I agree with that.
part of the reason for
Meaning,
leasing,
don't show it in the spreadsheet.
part of
Okay?
the reason for leasing the equipment is so that you don't have to make a capital plan for it.
Correct.
That doesn't mean the equipment isn't capitalized. That's a.
Right.
Capitalizing the equipment and booking the depreciation and so forth.
Right.
That's a whole
Okay.
different thing. But if this is a plan to put money aside for all of the things that you're gonna have to buy, yes, tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after. This represents contributions towards saving up some money
Mhm.
to make all of those.
Mhm.
The warrant article for leasing, by contrast, is seeking the permission of the voters to really just spend $170,000 for 4 pieces of equipment.
And it can.
Every year for the next 7
Yeah,
years.
right.
Recognize through the description in the warrant that in for a dime, in for a dollar, you're gonna lease $1 million worth of equipment. But don't be nervous. Because out of the operating budget is only gonna come $170,000 a year. And that's gonna save you from having to contribute the $1 million to the CIP
The
plan.
capital reserve.
Because that's real cash you put aside for the future.
Yeah, it's whether you put it in bucket A or bucket B is really
Yeah.
what's going on. We
Right.
understand
It's
all
how you interpret what CIP plan means. Is CIP plan only the plan to set aside money to spend later? Or is the CIP plan, the plan in a broader sense, to upgrade your equipment? However, you're gonna pay for it.
And that $170,000 replaces the otherwise
Yes, it does.
contributed
Yeah,
amount
yeah.
for the similar equipment.
Right, and I think most people will get that.
Okay,
So my question is, that I'm kind of get a little confused in my mind is, so. After 7 years,
yes,
right, we're gonna return the equipment theoretically, yes?
yes.
And so there's no plan to replace that in 7 years. What is the thought? I understand the thought would be to release the equipment. Right?
No,
But,
no.
Okay.
Keep going.
right, but what I'm saying is there is a requirement 8 years down the road. That we're gonna have to do something,
Correct,
right?
yes,
So whether that is we leave it in the general fund under warrants, come up with a new warrants.
New lease, you mean?
new lease.
New warrants, yes.
Right, or whether we're gonna start saving money to buy it
At that
Correct.
point.
at
So-
that point in time.
One of the values, if you will, by it. Is at the 7-year mark, that, what is the greater cost?
321.
321 right now.
That greater,
Plus.
Change.
that greater cost, make this up, $320,000, $350,000, that's ridiculous. At the 7-year mark. We know what they're going to give us for this, so we know as to the grader, for example, they're gonna give us, maybe making this up. $140,000
or whatever, yeah, yeah.
$70,000.
Right.
So that's real money. So when you go to replace that $350,000 grader. Your net new cost is only half as much because you're accepting the $140,000
$200.
guaranteed trade-in.
Yeah.
So when you get a new grader. You're applying the 140 against it.
I understand all
Right.
that. I get
So
that.
at the 8-year, the 7-year mark, you get to decide. Do we wanna just take that cash and buy a new one or release it? But yeah, you get to revisit the entire question.
Right.
7 years down the
Right,
road.
but what I'm saying is if we're gonna leave that option open, we should probably be thinking about whether or not we should be putting money into the capital fund. To have the option to buy, rather than have to
Well,
come
yeah.
up with,
Yeah, but then it's kind of like we're double.
I understand,
Yeah,
I get you.
That is the issue.
I'm just, I think people are gonna ask the question. I think that this question is gonna come up, and we better have good answers
I
to
think
it.
our answer could be if we can't afford to buy it now, we certainly can't afford to rent it and sock away the money to buy it.
Yeah.
That is the whole point. that you
Right, so
won't
do
live
we,
on it.
do we have numbers yet on, Bob, do we have numbers on the proposed?
I'm
Cash
waiting
back
for the
value
final
rule?
number on the grader. I did have a final quote, which I believe she used for the backhoe. And, cause we're adding a plow, cause our plow system does not work.
Yes, all right.
So that's what I'm waiting on, he's waiting on getting a quote.
Right, but at some point in time, before we get to the general
Yeah.
public with this,
I'm hoping to
we're
have it
gonna
in the next
know
couple weeks.
that there's a residual value at the end of 7.
Well, just like our trucks, I mean, if we get rid of those trucks, if we buy the Western Star, he will guarantee $110,000 to $130,000.
Right.
At the 7-year mark. Beyond that, it's a roll of the dice. He
Sure.
will Not guarantee that.
No, I-
And that is the Western Star, that is a 10-wheeler, not a 6-wheeler. There's zero value in a 6-wheeler.
It's a good thing we're buying 10s.
Well,
So, but I agree with Seth, we have to be able to identify. We have to
Good thing we're
identify,
buying those 10s.
we have to be able to identify the buyout value, the trade-in
Right.
value, so you for all that good.
Yeah,
That-
that would be,
that's gonna be
it's gonna be a selling point. And people are gonna say, okay, so it's $321,000 now. In 7 years, what's that thing really gonna cost?
so just for an example, a
But
town.
just to roll with that, you know what I'm saying?
Town-
So,
And
In my
zero
view-
equity like we did.
Yeah.
So they traded and they did a 10-year, they went through Caterpillar, did the municipality financing, so it's a 10-year lease. They got rid of it in 7, because they can only give you a 7-year warranty.
Mhm.
So they got rid of it in 7, they still had 3 years left. Towards another new one, so the first 6-7 years, they paid like $45,000 a year for that grader.
Mhm.
And then they traded in 7, then the payment dropped down to like $25,000.
Mhm.
Now they go every 5 years, so they figured that same town, instead of going to 7, for 7, year 6, they gotta put tires on that grader. So they do it every 5 years, they pay $16,000 a year, and they get a new grader every 5 years.
So would it behoove us to have whoever this questionable town is? Can we get them to give us that information? And use it publicly,
I can check with them too.
right, to say, here's an example of
Because it-
how theoretically.
Yeah.
How this actually, in actuality, works in a town,
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
I do.
Here's how it works, right, and this is the model that we're trying to emulate, if you will.
Right.
Right,
I mean, the bigger picture is 7 years from now, we're not gonna be able to afford to buy it, but.
I don't disagree with you, but.
Oh, that's what he said 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people.
I've
you know,
heard that for decades.
You know what I'm saying?
I've heard it for decades.
Yeah, I just,
right. All we need to do is get a majority.
Yeah.
We don't
No,
need
so-
a majority of one,
the question I had with this,
but we need to get enough information
Yeah.
in people's.
and I'll reach out and
Yeah.
see if those people are willing to give us some idea.
Yeah.
Talk to This here, on number,
Let's just be clear, if they've got a document, it's public document.
Right, that's what I'm getting.
yeah, I
at,
don't know if they've documented, I know that's how they run their lease and,
Right.
and why, this is what I was getting from the vendor. Number three, is, so that, updated project costs and CIP for greater backhoe and one ton per quote from me. So so my must-haves are 4 pieces of equipment, we're missing a 10 one there.
So, yeah, at the last meeting, you're right. you
We're missing a
identified-
10-wheeler?
In number
I
three.
thought-
In
When
number
we
three.
broke down my must-haves.
Oh, we're number 3, yes,
My must-haves
We're
was a
4 pieces
10-wheeler,
of equipment.
a
Yeah, no.
one-ton, a backhoe, and a grader.
right.
Oh, and I didn't, in these notes, I didn't, okay, I understand. I believe you got a quote for that and you put it in the sheet, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 300,000.
That's my mistake in these notes, that's all.
But the merit.
Got it, that's, take it. Merit, take it. The 10-wheeler should have been listed and I missed it.
I
Okay.
had a question before we moved on.
Was that, I mean, was that your question, Bob?
Yeah, that's what I raised my.
Okay, good.
Somebody had mentioned about saving for buying a new grader in 7 years, but I thought the point of the 7-year lease is you would technically own it at the end of the lease, but we were just choosing to turn it in, get a new grader and start a new lease. We wouldn't have to pay more money if we decided to buy it, right?
I don't know if you own it at 7 years, because I don't think you paid it enough.
It depends on what that lease statement is.
Well, we have the numbers,
Yeah,
right?
It's probably an option.
my bet is you'd have a buyout figure,
Let's do normal.
because you're gonna buy out the same value that they're gonna give you on the trade. And pass that on to somebody
And
else.
that could be, that's above me. That's fine.
So
We
does
should
that
know
make
the
sense?
answer to that.
The way I heard that, if I could try to
We
paraphrase,
never
that,
wanted
is,
to buy
we
it.
make these payments for 7 years. At that point, we don't automatically own it, but it's worth, let's say, $140,000. If we want to own it, we could, in theory, pay $140,000 and own it.
Yeah.
That's what I just heard.
Right, so what we should do is we can find out if that's the real number. That
Yeah.
Either it's,
Or whatever the number.
either it's $140,000
Or
credit,
$50 or whatever.
or buy it for 145,000, or buy it for 50, or whatever the number is. Right, but I mean, the whole thought behind this, Bob, in your mind, right, and in Guy's mind. Is that this, if we continue with the leasing program, we'll have a up-to-date, fresh, efficient fleet. Always. Right, rather than struggling with having to make repairs, having to downtime with machines and all this other kind of stuff,
Correct.
right? I mean, that's the real underlying, besides the cash requirement, which
Yeah.
is obvious.
Yeah.
But beneath that, below that is that we would then have a fleet that is up to date, modern and efficient
Yeah.
moving forward.
And then hopefully the equipment that we own is manageable with just Guy and not having to increase another.
Well, obviously, but if the program works, I think, say, they're going beyond that, they want to go into the
Right.
next round of
Just so
equipment.
you're aware,
Yeah, next year we want to come back and say, well, you know,
Yeah.
we want to now at
what
least,
Sadie just said,
But that's one of the factors that we're considering.
Yes.
Because right
I
now,
think it is
it's
big.
too much work for just
no,
one
it
person.
clearly is, right? Do we need,
you can't run.
and I
that
would probably
show
you, I'd be
efficient.
saying things like, if we don't, we're gonna have to hire another mechanic, if, whatever the number is.
Even if we have brand new
Oops.
equipment, there's
Okay.
too many pieces of equipment to have one guy
Oh,
even
all right.
remotely service anything by himself. It's just too much.
Right.
I mean, by doing this lease, we could mitigate having 3 guys in the shop and we can get by with a part-time guy like we've been doing. Yes.
All right, well, I think
Somebody-
that, but I think that, Sadie, I think that the select board
Okay.
should be putting that information, are you guys putting that information together, or is that gonna be a budget committee put together?
I'm not sure right now.
All right,
All right, so I need to get the meeting back on track.
Well, I have a
okay?
question about this. So, and forgive me if it's been asked and answered, but why are we increasing from 170 to 300? Because if I look out,
That was gonna be one of my questions today.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'll ask.
Go on,
it now
ask
then.
it.
So
Yeah,
if-
go ask it, because I was gonna ask it next anyway, go ahead.
Right, so if
The
we-
defensive paper or the big piece?
No, we're on the big piece.
So if we're looking at, in the future, a capital reserve balances for like EMS and fire and all of that, you know, we're hovering around 50-60,000.
Right, but the
But
highway,
highway, we're building up substantially.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need 300 unless I'm missing something.
all right, so maybe can I take a quick comment? I was gonna ask the exact same, bring up the same points. There's a couple of things that, Carrie Ann and I were fooling around with. One was we took out $300,000 item. Cause that was for the 6-wheel dump that we're gonna keep as the replacement, and we're never gonna replace it, so we took 300,000 out from the last range, correct?
What do you mean by that?
Well, right now, we're saying, one of the, keep the 6-wheel dump, the Western Star A as a backup and lease a new truck. Right? And the point is, we're not planning at the moment on ever replacing that backup.
No, as we start to replace, like to improve another one, that will become, and then we'll. that's
Right,
how
but
we'll-
so we don't have to have a line
Right.
item
So
for
we don't
actual
need to-
Because it's always been
replacement.
handy now.
Right, so that took out $300,000 out of the future forecasting, number one.
Right, and
Okay.
it's gone. I'm
And
looking
then
at
there
this
was
now.
2 other items, one that she and I are having.
Wait, I got another question on that.
Yes,
So by replacing that, just so I'm understanding, if I was gonna keep that as a backup truck, I'm still replacing that truck. I still need a front runner to replace, because that truck is an everyday running truck.
Yeah.
The reason why I wouldn't trade it in is because I actually need a backup truck in case something goes down.
Right.
So you still need to replace that truck.
right, but you'll be doing that down the road with another truck that you're gonna now buy a new one.
Yeah, you wouldn't replace the backup truck.
With
You
a new
would
one.
Replace another truck.
That you
Yeah.
bought,
that
it's already in the fleet.
And then just get rid of the.
Well, this is generated by the buying of a
So we
new
don't
truck.
have to plan to
That's how we get there.
replace a
yeah.
backup, we would just not trade in.
Yeah, we would not replace it back.
Correct,
We
correct.
just would not trade it
So
back.
that means you don't
And
need
we-
another $300,000 number in the plan
Right,
to buy a new
Yeah.
truck to replace the backup.
right.
That's the point,
Yeah.
the turnover
Yeah,
backups.
Correct,
Right,
yes.
yeah,
That's
so
the
that
bottom
was,
line.
that was one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that, I'm still uncomfortable with is, the excavator and the bulldozer. Right now, there is no clear consensus about whether or not we are gonna close the pit, dig our own sands, whatever. There is no definite plan, is that correct?
So may I, we talked about that
I'm
at
asking
length at the
Dave.
last meeting.
Yeah.
And at the last meeting, we all, Sandy was here, agreed those would not be in the plan. Because if you'll recall the discussion
I do.
on the excavator, if we need one for a few hours here and there to ditch roadsides, we'll rent one.
I
We
understand.
decided to take it out of the plan.
Right.
Okay, I'm just saying, we
Right.
made
But
that
I'm-
decision,
but I'm-
are we
but I'm-
revisiting
what
it
I'm
now
bringing
or
up
what?
Now is, I don't believe that there is a consensus at the select board level. About whether we are gonna close the current pit or not, number one. And even if we do close the current pit, whether or not we are going to buy another pit and continue at some point in time to dig our own seam and ground. Is that?
We have not taken a vote on it.
Mhm.
The sense that I get is that we have not explored the option of buying another pit at this time.
Yeah.
I don't think that's on the table.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure it is.
yeah, I haven't heard anything about it. I think that it is fine to leave them out of the plan.
That was what we decided last time.
Yeah, I know, and I'm uncomfortable with that.
I hear you.
And the reason I'm
Why?
okay, because if there is a decision made to either continue to use the existing pit. Right, or to close that pit and buy another one. Right, at some point in time, we're gonna need to replace the excavator and the bulldozer.
And so those costs are things that we
So you're
would look at in making a decision whether or not to buy a pit. And I think that when you add all that in, you add in the true cost of getting the sand, not what people are saying is the actual cost,
Mhm.
that it doesn't seem like that's a path that we want to take.
Okay, but all I'm saying is that at this point in time, that's not been decided yet. Right, and from a
That is.
capital improvement planning purposes, for equipment purposes, right? Until we have a definitive answer, I think it's incumbent on us to be at least prepared to do something like replace those if we need them. That's my argument.
I have zero plans to replace those pieces.
I know you do.
Even if we had a pit, I would rent it for 2 months. And we could work it that way where everybody goes in and blows everything out in 2 months, and that's a done deal. Then the thing goes away. That's a 250.
But
But older than that, you're talking like over $500,000 for that equipment. You can rent it.
Well, we have, the numbers we had were 200,000 on the excavator and 50 on the bulldozer.
If you want to try to buy a used dozer, you can beat it up and
I'm just,
work and have to.
all I could do is work with the numbers that I've
what was
seen.
the
I don't have
value of
any-
the contribution for those in that future budget? Do you remember? I only see it.
Yeah, see, I just put them in mine, so.
Yeah.
My version of the world, I put them back in. And the reason was
So-
because I had the same issue that Sadie had, right? Is when I was looking at the contributions being made for highway equipment, which started in 2024, 300, 350, 400, 450, 450, 450, 450. And then it scales down to 200, right, as the contribution for the year. And the balance in the fund, is, let me just take those two numbers out. If I take those two numbers out, well, if I leave those two numbers in, the balance in the CR balance whittles down to $2,240 in 2028. And from there, it escalates up to 462, 672, 882, 1,092, 1,032, 1,083, 743, 953. I mean, huge amounts of money that never get expended. Based on.
So if I may, that comes back to Sadie's question 5 minutes.
That's what I'm saying, is why.
We're showing you the plan right now, and I was gonna ask that today, I'm glad you did say. Why we're planning to contribute 300 this year, increasing by 50,000 a year, almost every year. To this capital reserve fund, where the balance builds up to well over $500,000. What's the reason? I think that's coming in the question first of all, I think she's proposed that in spreadsheet.
The reason is because you told me it was a 6-year plan and we were only keeping it out 16 years. To
Okay,
keep an eye on it, so I didn't.
well, it is 6-year plan, at the end of 6 years here,
Contributions,
if I may.
otherwise we're spread out over 16.
guys, at the end of 6 years at that level. The CR projected CR balance is $661,000. It would not seem like we need to be saving as much as 300 a year. Or 300, 350, 400, 450. It seems like it's higher amount of capital reserve input than is needed that, and we should consider. That was my only big concern with the numbers that were in here. When I looked at it last night, was that number. The number of people in the capital reserve.
I think we all got-
A highway equipment.
We all got
Very
very
high.
happy.
Yeah, so we can just,
Should, so. go ahead,
You're gonna
Julie.
have to figure out how to adjust for inflation though, at the rate that.
Well, we're doing all this.
Well,
current numbers,
We're doing current year,
That'll be different.
current year dollars, so that's gonna adjust
Kind
every
of a
year.
different question.
We have to save real cash.
Right,
So look what happened with the fire truck. We have $550,000 saved up, but we have to pay over 600,000.
right.
So
Yeah, but I think this was the first conversation we had when we first sat down with you. Which is, we decided that we're gonna use current year dollars and not project out any costs in the future. And the reasoning behind that all, we all understood was that every year, we were gonna get new quotes on the equipment, so that we would be narrowing the gap each year as we move forward. That was the understanding. Otherwise, I would have never approved that. I would have gone for the, cost increase every year moving forward, some kind of forecast.
well, I
But-
wonder if we put this in when we were still debating on lease or not, because then we were
That's
building up
kind
the
of-
cash to do the purchase.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
So I guess we have one,
So let's take two steps quickly.
if you look at your prior balance in 2029, though, you only have $250,000 saved up. So if you need to buy a piece of equipment in addition, if you're not gonna have any money in 2029.
wait a minute.
Well, that's assuming that we're not
Wait,
gonna have those
time
two
out,
things.
time out. Harry, in the spreadsheet you mailed us yesterday, said in 29, the projected balance is 661,000. That's not what you just said. What you said yesterday, this is weird.
Yeah, and then you called me today and had me change a whole bunch of stuff, so I gave you.
What's that?
Like.
Hey, change stuff.
Balance.
Like it's down in the 200s, and that's like not even a.
How did that change from yesterday?
In
Didn't
2028?
Talk about this at all.
Well, the answer, is it 2028? We're gonna get that number?
These two are deleted out. I
They were
deleted
gone,
out
they
that-
were gone, these two were gone before I went out there. It's a long time ago.
Well, I don't know what version I'm looking at. I printed out
Sorry, yeah.
today.
So let's look what you printed out, what you have today. Let's look at that number for a minute.
Yeah,
Because that is the question is, how much capital reserves makes sense for the highway equipment. For the next, I'd say at least for the 6 years.
Well, at the end of 6
So-
years, it's 712. In the end of 2029, we would have 712.
That's not the number she just called out. That's
I'm sure it is. In 2029 it is, absolutely.
Well, then
Which
in
is-
2028, you
Where is
can
it?
decrease,
In 2028, it's 252.
but to
Right.
get through 25, 26, 27, like
Mhm.
we need to seriously increase how much we save to cover all the expenses coming out. Like 2025, we're gonna have to pay another 330,000. 26, there's $585,000 worth of equipment.
I'm sorry, but I'm confused.
Yeah,
I'm not seeing the 252 you guys are seeing. I'm seeing $880,000 balance.
That's everything all combined.
That's
like
all combined.
That's
fire
just
truck.
the balance.
Yeah, here's the.
Oh,
yeah.
highway.
Oh, all right,
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. There you
gotcha.
go.
So for highways, it's 252, 240. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
I see what you're saying, I don't know, in a year where we're gonna be so compressed, do we drop it back down to 170 and then we know the town's appetite for leasing, we know people's appetite for leasing, and are we, could we potentially lease this vehicle next year? and
We
do
could.
300?
I would suggest 200, maybe not 170, which was last year's number. That 170 is what we had for capital reserve savings projected last year for this year. So I would suggest we increase it modestly, maybe 200. And then a little more next year and a little more the year after, but certainly not as high as we show here.
Well, I
Seems like
think
it's
that
too
would,
much.
if it covers the numbers that we're talking about, whatever the number we put in there, I don't care if we get to a $2 balance,
I agree.
right, after 5 years,
That's what we should be doing.
right? Because then we're doing our due diligence, which is we're preparing to buy all of that equipment and we have enough money we will have enough money in the till to buy it. Even if we only wind up with a $2 balance at the end of that year, that's okay. And next year, theoretically, as we see things change, we can start to increase those contributions. So I'm with you and I'm with you, Claude. I don't know where you are on this.
How do you summarize that? I think the committee is asking Kevin Ann to reduce the 300 capital reserves number to something closer to 200 or so. You said 170 and around 200 and increase it slowly like you did. With the eye towards when you get to 2028, the balance could be near zero. But at least we'll be recommending that we set aside what we need for the next 5 years.
5 years, so that's
No,
roughly
that's-
I'll use
$70,000
it
a
whatever
year.
you want, but just so you know, I had put all kinds of variations
Yeah.
of that capital reserve warrant. To keep the first 6 years not going negative. This is
Yeah.
the
It doesn't go negative, it ends up at 250 positive. And we're
About
paying,
70,000 a year.
because the overall is a lot of money, let's bring it down a little more, that's all.
Okay.
So that it can be near zero at the end of the 5 to 6 years. We're going to be revisiting this every year. But it's, right now, it appears to be too high in terms of the amount of money we're asking the voters to provide right away next year. It's a large pill to swallow.
Yeah, if you took 70,000 a year for 5 years, that would be what? That's 350, so we can't quite do that.
Can't quite do that.
So it's more like 50 times 5, which is 250, right? So if you reduce each of the years $50,000, so you were 250, 300, 350, 400, 400.
Yeah.
That would get you to,
I'll see that with you on the computer.
No, I know.
Yeah. Bring
Well,
up the
but then-
years.
But then each year after,
Okay.
we can adjust that number.
yes, we can,
yes.
We can
exactly,
always adjust it.
Yeah, and I
It's what the
It
numbers
doesn't
go
have
for
to
this
be in
year.
there forever.
right, yeah, and to say, so
But
that,
the first year's number is what's gonna go in the budget,
Yeah.
and
so
then
that's-
it's too high.
yeah, so that's what gets us, we cover our responsibility, I think.
Yeah.
If we
Yeah.
put the numbers in that get us where we want to be, regardless of the small balance.
Next year we'll have a new view and.
Next
we'll adjust
year,
it as needed.
You know, if we come back and we say, oh, guess what, instead of buying 300. Let's spend $330,000 worth of equipment. We're now gonna get we're gonna get a new 10-wheel dump truck and lease it, and we're gonna do something else, 300, put that in the new lease bucket. And that's only gonna cost you a little bit of money, and it goes into the other reserve, and that way we have less money required going forward as a capital account, if you will, right? So I'm for lowering it, the 50,000 a year.
To reasonable,
To get
as long as we can reasonably
Yeah.
do and know that we're gonna be near zero, 5,
Yes.
6 years out, but so be it for now.
That's right.
Start with
Right.
200 Start with 200.
Well, that may be too low.
That's too low.
His mental math real quick said, 200 might not be
So
enough,
I
we
think-
might end up
I
going
think
negative.
it's 50 a year. If you cut the numbers 50 a year, you're gonna get the savings of 2.
Let's let Kelly do her job.
I will.
She will use the spreadsheet, she heard our spirit,
I will.
reduce it so that it cuts to near zero in 5 or 6 years, and she can use the power spreadsheet to figure that out in 2 minutes.
I just think if we're saying to people that overall. It's better to lease, and this is what we have to do for affordability, and last year we asked for 170, and this year we're gonna ask for. 470, they're gonna say, okay, you're not, this is not saving us any money. You know, you're not being transparent. I would like to lower it more than just 50.
Mhm.
We revisit the plan every year.
Okay, I'm open
So
to
you're
doing that.
suggesting for the coming year, instead of the 300 number showing in the plan, it should go down to, at least down to 200. Last year was 170, and we know inflation is happening.
I think we're in a
Well-
year of flux though, where we don't know what's gonna happen, as much as we can try to plan for 5, 6, 7 years
Right.
out, we don't know because we're trying to change so many things.
So you're saying it should come down to at least 200, and I think what you're saying.
I think if it were at 200, that, and we still had to purchase that truck next year, that would meet our needs.
Correct.
There you go.
And
So
then
that's what you're suggesting.
and then we evaluate what we need going forward, that's my suggestion, it might seem short-sighted, but there's so many variables, that's.
So I would support that right now. Try 200 for next year, 250, and slowly increase after that. It may show going negative on the future, but again, there are a lot of unknowns.
When people are really used to us saying this warrant article is gonna be funded without raising taxes, and that's not. going
That's
to be
not
on
gonna
the
be the case this year,
Right,
because the unanticipated fund balance is not sufficient, is that right?
We don't
Is that
have
what I-
the designated fund balance,
We
we've
don't.
been zeroing it out every year, which is against
Yeah.
CRA.
Well, I'm good with the 200 plus 50 plus 50 plus.
I think
Well,
we
that
need to
won't
go
get
down
you
to
to,
at least
you
200
won't have the number if you do that.
coming year.
If you did
You don't have the
200
number of when.
in,
It's gonna go negative.
You're gonna come up short at the end
Later.
of 2028.
Okay, we'll worry about.
We'll have to worry about that later.
I'm just
What
saying,
we're saying,
his
yeah.
report, he's gonna wind up with a negative number,
That's right,
okay?
that's right.
If
We're
that's
gonna
what
have to
you wanna
identify that as a
propose,
risk.
You can identify that as a risk,
I think
I think it's short-sighted.
what Sadie is saying is if we go for as much as 300 this year,
I-
it's gonna get shot down
I'm-
in a
I'm-
blaze of glory.
I totally understand Sadie's
She's right.
issue. I think she's probably got a good case to make there.
Well, how much
But-
short we're gonna be? Could we do like 50, 50, 60, 60, 70?
Well, at
Or
the end of,
something like
at the
that.
end of 2028, if we start with just reducing the number to 200, you wind up with 152,000 at the end of 2028.
These projections
Yeah.
include
Oh, it's
the
the same.
return
Okay.
of money for the excavator and the dozer a couple years out.
I deleted this.
How do you, they're not in the plan.
They're not in the
in
plan,
there,
they're
it's
taking it out.
excess.
You put them back in. and
Oh,
you short
then it
fund
gets worse.
And you make it up in 2028 by saying, okay, we don't need the excavator, the dozer.
That wouldn't, no, that would not.
No, that would
would not
make it even
make
worse.
It makes the situation.
Put those
worse.
numbers in, it would make it worse.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Or do we say, hey, our philosophy is changing and we realize that trying to save all of this money, we're never going to have enough to purchase these vehicles. Our money's not growing with the rate that the inflation is going up for the cost of them, so we're moving towards leasing. I mean, that's,
Again, I think you have issues as the select board, right? that You have to address with the town, right? The things you gotta address. There's responsibilities and requirements that this group, the CIP committee needs to address. Right? And I think one of our requirements is that we have enough money in the till to pay for the things that we are planning to buy. That's my feeling. So if that runs contrary to what you guys are thinking about as a future plan, oh, well, too bad. Then you've got to sell your piece, but I think we're required ethically and morally to propose a plan that is financially sound as best we can.
But if we follow that, we get locked into an amount that we can't change, and that's not.
Would not be on the
So
first
no,
year.
that's
Not beyond
not
We're not locked in
It's
anything
just
except
1 year
first
that
year.
we get locked in. We can
That's something
change
she wasn't-
based on the requirements moving forward.
Well, but
Meaning
you-
if next year we decide that we're gonna lease a $300,000 piece of gear instead of buy it for $300,000. That changes the capital requirement for that year and years
Change the
forward
profile.
dramatically, right? I mean, it's a dramatic change, and I recognize that. and-
So we're
and I
not
think-
locked in though, Tom. Your key concern, only the first year, if that number is whatever it becomes, let's say it becomes 200 for capital reserves for highway equipment. That will be the warrant article this March and will be locked in for 2024.
Right.
Only, not, the rest is future projections, a plan.
Right.
And we think we'll need this much the year after and this much the year after that. The only one that gets locked in is the first year one. And at the moment, the first year number is 300,000 just for highway equipment, plus the lease payments. And as Sadie has pointed out, that's trying to get blood from a stone from our taxpayers. It's too much for the first year.
Yeah.
We don't want to lock it in at 300. I think we're all saying the same thing in different ways.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
The only question
I mean,
becomes, what's the
theoretically,
right
You
number?
could make that number 100 and leave everything else the same, and you still don't go negative.
Yeah, but
I
I
mean, we
don't
could-
want to do that either. So,
Well,
so let's
I
give
mean-
Carrie Ann some clear direction. Let's allow her to go and replan that so that it gets us to near zero 5 or 6 years out.
right,
And,
Right.
and the number should be around 200 for next year we're looking for.
Right.
Can you work on that, please? I think that's what we're saying in a lot of different ways, guys. We need to kind of put a pin in that and move on to a few other topics. We could go in circles on that one all day. We have other ones to deal with. What do you think? Is that all right? 300 is way too high, good point, Sadie. Try to get it to 200 for the first year if you can, close to that.
I think Jack has something to add.
I just wanted to be sure what goal we're shooting. Are we shooting for 200 or are we shooting for near zero? Because if you shoot for near zero, you can back it into what it should be today. Or if you do it forward, then you.
I hear you.
The other way.
What would
You have
you,
to kick it back and
what do
forth.
you think would work best? You know,
And how negative do you want to be?
So you're basically telling me to make the balance in 2029 zero. And then adjust all the warrant articles.
Let me write the sheet.
That's what I.
So make-
You can do that.
Yeah, 2024 warrant article is gonna be 200,000, and then do whatever it takes in
Oh.
between the 2029 zeroed out.
So 229 at the moment is 712,240. Right. Okay.
You can bring
So-
it down to $1, that's the favorite figure. of
The
mine.
thing about me is the year before that. You bring that one to near zero, the year before that, in my mind,
28?
become very negative. That's the problem, right? So I wouldn't want you to go more than a few percent negative. You know what I mean, in years 4 or 5,
Well,
it
I
dips
don't-
down a little, then it comes back.
I don't think as a plan you can go negative. but-
right, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Well,
I don't
yeah,
want-
no,
You
to
could, you
future,
could bring it down to $100.
Yes,
all right. But it can't be in 29, coming in to zero, because the year before that will be a problem.
Right.
It'll go negative on.
I think 28 is your target year, if you get 28 down to, you
28,
know,
$100.
Say
$100
28 down at 100.
and then work it backwards.
Yeah.
And then,
Agreed.
you know, pick
There
it
you
up
go.
from there,
Let's do it that.
then you're fine, and,
Let's do
and,
it.
and skew the numbers, the lower numbers at the front end. I think will help the select board with, in terms of what they're trying to, you know,
This first year is a big problem, is a big issue.
educate the community about. You know, I think that would make sense.
Okay, well, we're not trying to put you on the spot, we're saying it is too high, we need to bring it down, and we're trying to. Give you,
I'll plug in whatever numbers you want me to plug in.
well, get it to, like what Jack said,
27 will be
at
there.
the end of 28, $100. How's that? That's your target.
Yep.
At the end of 28, and just adjust the
And
invoice.
everything else stays the same moving forward.
I think, so.
Yeah, and that will adjust your warrants for highway equipment as well.
all right, we need to move on.
And that way you're certainly not saving more than you need to.
Right.
You recognize what you need to spend and you're trying to find that balance.
Yeah,
And
that's what we
anything
have.
else that you need in the future, you don't know what those prices are anyway.
Don't know yet.
Sit down.
Right,
And we don't know if we're gonna be able to, you know,
You got it,
if the
so-
community decides that leasing is a program they wanna buy. And there are items coming up that we can then
Alright.
put onto the lease as an add-on. And they'll see how that's gonna save them in the future. This is not a bad idea, so.
Okay, let's move on. Numbers 6 and 7 on here. Were about the two different funds for EMS. And I believe those have both been complete and they've been researched and Carrie Ann's got the right numbers in the spreadsheets and so on. All right, so I think numbers 6 and 7 on this open actions are complete. From what I saw in emails and all that. Number,
On that note, is it okay to run a warrant article to close out that ambulance capital reserve?
do you need to, I'm supposed to spend it, you do. What do you want, what do you think we should do, Jack? Should we Run a warrant article to extract the last of that money from the capital reserve account and use it towards its next ambulance?
Well, I think the short answer is yes, because your warrant article is gonna buy an ambulance.
Right.
And you will identify the source of those funds. In other words, some of it could. be
Oh,
from
68,
capital reserve,
yeah,
and the rest of it could come from an expendable trust fund. And then you might end it with, there's no impact on taxes to be raised.
the only detail there
So
might be,
if you've got the expendable fund, and you've got some capital. And there's enough to buy it. The warrant article expresses at the end that it is budget neutral, there's no. Need for. Fresh tax dollars to buy the ambulance.
so that's true.
Yeah.
The only detail there is, I don't believe you need a warrant article to spend the money in the enterprise fund.
You probably
You
don't.
only need the warrant article for the capital reserve.
Right, but. That's true, but it's kind of enter a diamond for a dollar. You need the warrant article for any purpose.
Right.
For all purposes. If
You
you
can
want to be
explain
able
it
to
all.
describe how you're gonna pay for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, as long as it's described properly, that's fine. Just
So
yeah.
if that warrant article failed. And you couldn't access that capital reserve fund, you could still spend the expendable trust, because.
Yeah, you could,
That doesn't revoke that.
right.
They would just have to buy half of an ambulance.
You know, something. fine, yeah.
Two-wheeled ambulance, instead of a four-wheeled ambulance.
And now that we know what the plan's been in the past, we can just close out the capital reserve.
Right.
And continue forward with the revolving.
Right.
Okay, that's
right.
just, that was a fluke. There was no reason to create that capital reserve in the first place. It should have just gone into the expendable. So you gotta go through the door again to close it out.
Yeah.
And free up that money.
Yeah. Okay, that's, yes, the answer is, that's good. Number 8, best estimates for the cost of 3 bridges. The numbers in carry a spreadsheet now, based on what your best estimates are right now, I
Yes.
think they are.
Yes.
So I think number 8 is complete.
We're all set with Bob and Guy. We can go back.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any other highway.
Trying to get
Did you guys have in the budget
Sorry,
request for, Guy, did you have another mechanic in for the budget request for salaries for?
Right.
Yeah, let's talk about it tonight.
Oh, we are, is tonight, is that tonight's topic?
Tonight, we're supposed to be at the budget. meeting,
Yes.
right?
Right, I assume so, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I got
Well, no,
chemo fog, so leave me alone.
The email that I got from Ellie was,
No excuse.
we're on it, and I sent it to her.
And hand out, and that's where I left it, so I was gonna ask Carrie Ann to officially send it.
The problem is you're not gonna have a chance to read it.
You can't read it during the meeting,
I
yeah.
know, well, that's why I wanna get it, if I can get it out today, at least have an hour of it.
Well, do you have it by email? You can just.
I
could
could
you
do,
just send it
I
out to
didn't
everyone?
feel, I didn't feel appropriate to send it out,
No,
I
I
left that to Nate, and he decided not to.
Okay.
I know, you don't wanna jump over the chair.
That's right.
Right, yeah.
Sal, we need to go first, but.
Okay, guys, you need to go first tonight, is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do what I can do.
Hold turn. Thank you.
Good, just a few more,
Okay.
number 8 is complete. Number 9.
I just come, I don't, we've not had any idea about a second mechanic. We haven't had that discussion.
Apparently he wants to bring that up. for the budget committee.
Yes, he does.
Apparently, when they hear it, yeah. Number 9,
We haven't folks scoped that out, have we? In the budget?
I didn't even calculate that out. This
Yeah,
is a-
no, it's just the first I've heard of it.
understand.
If anything, we're moving away from the halftime that we have allocated.
Oh, really? Ha!
Well, all I can tell you is from my discussions with these gentlemen has been that their belief is that for every 20 plus 21 pieces of equipment that you need to maintain, you need 1 mechanic. We've got 55 pieces of equipment.
Some, yeah.
Something like that, 52.
Yeah, so that translates into a minimum of 2 plus mechanics.
I don't,
So
I think that you've got enough of a suicide mission on your hands now. You've got
So,
adding-
bottom line, that's a big problem, but it's not for here. We need to move on.
Totally
It's
fine,
not
fine,
CIP.
fine, I'll do it
More to
tonight.
do.
I'll work on that tonight.
We'll work on that tonight.
Thank you very much.
No, but here, honestly, here's the thing. You're gonna. Hopefully, at least 4 pieces of equipment, those are heavy
Every minute
pieces of equipment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. Next year, you're gonna have fewer pieces of equipment to maintain, than you do now. At the moment. The board authorized. One of the highway people
We have time.
to spend half time doing mechanic stuff.
Right.
So you got 1.5. Recently, the board said. You come up, you work through the backlog, it looks like you don't need that person anymore. Remember that discussion?
Mhm.
So that. Conceptually moved that borrowed. Person back to highway 100%. With this guy doing that, and maybe if you need to, you pitch in every once in a while. That's the way it is, as I understand it today.
Mhm.
So so I know the numbers, I know the theory. But I don't think.
We'll find out tonight.
I won't, I have a different meeting tonight.
I'm good for you.
I add
Still.
to what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think the whole point, I was looking at my role in these committees is I'm just compiling the needs and wants of the
Sure.
department heads.
Yes.
And then I was relying on the committees to start reining it in
Yes.
and organizing the
That's
chaos.
absolutely right.
Yeah,
So
correct.
everybody
correct.
wants their
You're right.
voting out.
Yeah,
You're right.
you're like the Swiss, you're the.
We-
I'm
We-
yeah.
We haven't asked you, originally it was
You're
on
the
the 7,
Swiss,
8.
we're the,
we made
we're
them
the,
in
we're the
4,
antagonists.
right?
And you can all make the cut for the
Yeah.
budget and we'll respect it.
There will be some of that going on tonight. I guess.
Well, I'm sorry, but we're dealing with the mechanic stuff. I
I
gotta
keep going.
shut that down. Number 9, do we have an quote yet for the ambulance?
Okay.
That's interesting. We need that. We need to know if it's 202 or 202 is gonna be enough. That's the number that you threw in there based on your recent experience, but. Boy, I'm surprised that Chief MC has not come up with that quote. He was gonna get right on that 3 weeks ago.
That's something, but I forget, like, we had a conversation last week. But this week. is easy for me.
I got you. Well, that's a significant open item in a way. I guess, worst comes to worst, if he doesn't give
Well-
us a quote, we say we 202, if he doesn't have enough, he's gonna be stuck,
That's right.
right?
Is that the 202 we've got in there?
202,000 is what's in the plan right now, and that's only based on Jack's recent experience, I think, of buying an ambulance for the county. But it's a round number. It's not the quote for the configuration of the ambulance that Chief Hennessy needs to buy. And again, 2 to 3 weeks ago, he was gonna get right on that and get a quote for the configuration he needs. I feel bad that we don't have the right number in there, but for lack of the right number, we'll leave the 202 in there and hopefully he can live with it, I guess.
Yeah, I gave him the total amount of money we had saved up and we felt comfortable with the revolving fund balance plus the 50,000 from capital reserve.
So how much money has he got in total? Do you have a recollection?
It looks like 243,304. Is that part of
That's
balance?
not- he's got it.
Is that right?
I think,
43?
uh,
I think I.
Even if he's off by 20%. He's got
Yeah,
enough
that's-
to buy the ambulance.
All right, so we can cross that off and go on to 10.
253,304.
Because I can almost guarantee you're not gonna hold the price that long anyway.
Right.
So, but he's got a 20% on edge. He
Oh,
doesn't
it's-
have, you know,
trade-in value, yeah.
he doesn't need 50,000 to equip it because he's gonna take the stuff out of the first ambulance, put it in the new.
Right.
That's a big cost.
So part of that same response from Chief Hennessy was supposed to be trading value as well to help offset the 202. Right now we have 0 in there.
So
Okay,
you're done with that.
we're done.
Okay.
All right, fine.
So I think then we
No.
just need to schedule a next meeting just to look at the final spreadsheet and vote to approve it.
A couple other cleanup items, if you don't mind.
No, sorry, Sal. It's not my meeting, it's Claude's.
Okay, I would like to. You
You
came
can
in,
still vote against it.
I'm
We've been here an hour. That's
this thing called the warrant summary with CR balance, you're not maintaining that accurate numbers anymore in there.
No, because I would have to update it every month.
So we should get rid of that from this spreadsheet, so it doesn't cause any confusion. You okay with that?
unless you.
Well, we gotta keep it somewhere, but
Well, I'm asking, she's the one, she's.
Also, you know, it was useful back in
Yes.
September when nobody knew what the balance.
All right, so then let's get rid of it. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't need it. If it's helpful to you, if not, don't make extra work. for you.
Okay.
Go ahead, no, what else?
The other thing is, I see we've moved the buildings for the garage back, is that accurate? The highway garage addition to 2026?
My understanding
Go ahead.
is that the concept of an addition to a highway isn't really a conversation that the board's even had yet, let alone describing what it is we want, what it's gonna be looking like, what it's gonna hold, how long it's gonna take, who's gonna do it. So
I
we've had a
disagree,
general
but
discussion
you,
about,
you've had specific discussion. Dan's collected all kinds of information on this.
really,
Yes,
A year ago,
yes.
Dan Collins got deeply involved, collected the number, he got an estimate from an electrical contractor, an estimate from a plumber, an estimate from a concrete guy. Plus they had the written estimate from the provider of the shell. Put all that together a year ago, and I sent it out by email a couple of months ago to remind everybody what we had come up with.
Yeah.
So it's not so much about not having done the homework, it's about what I heard Kelly say today. Maybe, given the problem with the church, the meeting house steeple and the library repairs and the roof on the senior center, maybe the town just can't afford the highway garage addition right now.
that I certainly agree with.
That would be the issue right now about highway garage.
But
Yeah, one of my concerns is if we're gonna be buying all this new equipment. And we should probably try to put together the right housing for it. So that we can keep it in as good a condition.
It'd
as
certainly be a
possible.
good thing to do. We've supported
So I'm
the
just-
addition,
I-
but can the
so
town afford it?
So I'm
Okay.
concerned about trying to push it off too far, because I think that, you know, we
Yeah.
wanna. I think it'll
Right.
improve your overall financial position if you can maintain the equipment in a better,
Keep the equipment in better shape.
So,
Agreed,
yes.
agreed.
so that's my concern.
I really think
I'm
the
okay
select
with it
board
for
and
now,
and
but-
budget committee will have to decide if the town can afford it.
I
We
understand.
certainly recommend it,
Mhm.
the addition.
Right.
Based on some reasonable numbers from a year ago.
Yeah, no, I
A package of reasonable numbers.
Sure.
So is it okay to
So-
recommend it for 26?
Well, it was in
You wanna-
25, and what Sal just noticed is based on Jack's talking to Jeremy, and they moved it a year. Should it stay there? I don't know. It's. What do
We
you think,
haven't had
Jack?
any conversation about it since I've been on the board.
Mhm.
I just wasn't aware from this board
Yes,
that
Right.
there was even a decision that supported any addition. But I'm happy to be wrong. I mean,
Right.
I don't know, I hear you through all these-
Not sure the boards reviewed it, but CIP did a year ago.
I think maybe this was Dan on his own
It
doing.
wasn't on
this.
his own, he was
No,
part of the
no,
CIP
he was
committee.
part of the CIP at that.
Well, I know he was.
So it wasn't on his own at that point. We as a committee
You
reviewed
mean
it,
outside of the select board, you don't know if he's discussed it with them? That's the point.
and that's the select board.
Yeah,
Right,
no, no,
right.
that's.
Yeah.
Right, right.
I don't feel as though this conversation done a 360 to get everybody
Right,
on the
agreed.
same page, because
It could come up at budget committee tonight.
Yeah.
The highway guys are gonna be there.
Yeah.
It could be the place to start that discussion, right?
You bet.
Okay.
so.
So what do we tell Carrie Ann for the moment, leave it where it is, because
It's
we don't
fine,
know any
they
better?
want, they're pushing it back to 2026, okay. For now,
Okay.
Where,
For now.
where is it? Where's it? Where's it?
under the new one.
On the
government
building safe,
On the building site.
Yeah, there's two items.
It used to be in 2025 and now it's in 2026.
That's what's out there.
And does that bump out and push out the contribution towards it?
No. the
Well,
contribution
I want to
stayed
ask
the same.
about the, not
Well, I'm
quite,
saying it stayed the same.
not quite.
Oh,
Hold on.
not quite.
I have a follow-on question
Okay,
about the contribution.
Yeah.
Up until 3 weeks ago, the contribution to capital reserves last year and the year before, and this year up until now, had one line for $40,000 or $50,000. I now see two separate $50,000 lines.
Right.
And I wanted to ask at this meeting, was that, Jack, perhaps your advice to Carrie Ann, why are we now looking at $100,000 for buildings, for capital reserve savings per year, where we have been looking at 40 to 50? What changed?
I added that because you're looking at a renovate town office.
Yeah.
For 400,000, garage addition.
Oh,
for
because it goes
300,000.
negative,
Yeah.
Well, it
and
goes
we
negative
still don't really have
regardless.
enough money even at that.
it goes negative.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't think we can afford another 50,000 in this category as well, on top of the ones we talked about before.
Right.
For capital reserve savings for buildings. What do you think?
I mean, I think that the work to the senior center and the library is probably going to have to happen next year if we can, and so that won't be funded from capital reserve.
Right,
Right,
Um,
how about
Yeah,
the
the
bell
fund-
tower there, the meeting tower thing?
Hopefully the
Well-
meeting house committee will
Yeah.
do some fundraising.
Fundraising all of the time.
Yeah, that's what I thought, that was, or at least
So-
grants of some kind.
I'm not aware that,
For the meeting house, you mean, for, oh, yeah.
yeah,
So let me ask my question more directly, say, the input to capital reserves for buildings, will, this coming year, will need to come from the general fund.
Mhm.
It was, a year ago, we said it would be 50 this year. I'm suggesting we probably need to stick to 50, we can't jump it to 100. For this year,
'Cause
input to capital reserves.
we're planning to have a warrant article to raise the funds to do the work on the library. Yeah.
So should we not save any money towards buildings this year because we're running the warrant article for the library to raise and appropriate the library money because we're gonna spend it in the same year?
Right.
So you just
There are-
suggested 0.
Yeah, because
My
we're,
suggestion is stay at the 50 we were at. I'm in the middle. I don't think we can jump to 100, but I don't think we should reduce it to 0 either. We need to save some money towards either a highway garage addition or however the town decides to spend it for buildings.
We've been talking about highway for
Yeah,
7 years, but we just never actually had a plan until, I do remember that Jen had something last year, but then we haven't talked about it since.
I hear you.
and I guess I might have missed some of that, but I know what the building's gonna look like. So I don't know what it's gonna be built like, but
Yeah.
in Brattleboro, DPW highway, they're building an addition, it's $300 a square foot. I don't know how many square feet this addition is intended to be.
Yeah.
It was
Well, they've
all
got it, I
planned
mean,
out
it's,
last year.
you find it, Dan's got it, he's got all the stuff on it,
I can find it too.
Oh, you have it
just Don't
too?
want to waste your time. Yeah, we shared it with everybody a
Right.
year ago.
okay.
Everybody, now, of course, Jack, I know you were here then,
Yeah.
but I refreshed, I thought this committee this year.
But
So one sheet summary that I
Oh,
did,
you know, it's, I
one of
can't
the,
remember.
And it was 300,000?
I mean,
it was 300,000. It was, well, it was a
That's
little
all
under that, it was 280 something.
Okay,
We rounded it up to 300.
I'm comfortable leaving it at 40 or 50.
That's what I
Because
would,
then we're still putting something aside
Right.
towards the highway.
I would say 50.
So we have other significant building expenses that that's my feeling.
Now, we have another account, there's 2 accounts, right? And you just said you.
Oh, the other one is 16,000,
Yeah,
right? That can be used.
we have this inactive highway building account, which is why I put it as the warrant article. Our capital reserve accounts, that's why I give you the bank statement. It's-
yeah, you got
that's-
2 accounts,
Agreed.
this is
Like,
crazy. but we have
It's
2
the
accounts.
second section, these are all of our capital reserve accounts. We only actively use the ones we're familiar with, but
Right,
at no point have we ever cleaned them up. So that's where that highway building
Right.
capital reserve.
so there's a $16,000 fund balance laying around,
And that's not the meeting house one, right? That's.
Not,
it's, well,
Can I use your
again.
mouse? Thank you.
So I think we do need to research that and find out what's going on with that, and
if we close out these extraneous funds or consolidate them.
Right.
What's the total amount?
you pick up 16,000
Oh,
on the government.
you pick up 16 and put added to this new balance.
Like,
So
there's still a library renovation fund that has $346 in.
Yeah, we
and
want
maybe
that.
We had asked
346.
Yeah,
And there's like 5 of those types of accounts that Cindy Neely had been asking to close. We just never did the administrative work to close them out.
Right.
And that's only a couple $1,000 just to clean up our capital reserve.
Just need to clarify.
Okay.
Jerry. All right, so I think, you know, it adds to the pot, that's all I'm getting at.
I think I can summarize this clearly by saying.
Yeah.
Go back to just one line item for capital reserves from buildings, 50K,
Then
number one.
can we close out the highway?
Well, I'm gonna get in that. The
That's not up to us,
16,000 that's in an account, if you could transfer it legally
right? It's
to
the government,
the capital reserve, this capital reserve account. fine.
that's great.
If you cannot, the next answer is, let's say that there's a warrant article a year from now to build a highway garage addition. That warrant article would easily say, take 16,000 from that account and the rest from this other account.
Yeah.
And then you'll zero it at that time.
Right, so whatever. we
If
do
you
with
can't
that.
transfer it legally now, just wait until we have a warrant article to build a garage.
Yeah, but I think you're on the right track. So
Second in that.
anytime you can now consolidate things, because you're kind of in a grace period and people are gonna say it's a good idea, let's just get it all cleaned up. Then let's do it. Right?
But 16 isn't much towards 300,000. Let's not let the tail wag the dog.
I understand.
We'll put a withdrawal slogan for 160. See if we can get it in.
So,
They won't know it before the end of the day, but by then we'll spend it.
a couple more things, before we all get too restless here. Hmm. I'm sorry about that, I think some numbers now. I thought I had on my version of the agenda, I thought. One item that I had to ask you guys about today. Bear with me. See. Nothing new. Go to agendas, sorry. What I had to tell them that.
Take on the road.
You want, I got an extra, you want another list?
Needs to be on the palm of my hand.
Yeah. Right. You like to know what play we're going?
Right, right.
I found it, let me, oh, yes, okay, good. I think Sadie mentioned it a few minutes ago, we're gonna talk about probably needing to schedule one more meeting, it's gotta be really soon, because next week's Thanksgiving. So let's summarize what we think the changes are we've asked Kevin to do today, I think there's only a couple. We haven't talked bridges yet, I'm sorry, we're gonna get the bridges in a minute. But on buildings, we said go to one line of 50, that changed basically, capital reserves input. And on highway, we talked about reducing that capital reserves input line to as much as you can to get to near zero of that
Yeah, the
discussion.
28.
Those two changes. I'm not sure we've asked Carrie Ann to make any other changes to the spreadsheet yet. Today,
Other than
to
removing.
what
that
she
crazy
said
tab.
yesterday, other than what?
Removes in the warrants tab.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
but
And
the
move-
actual plan, go ahead,
I'm sorry, what did you say? Move the truck lift out 5 years.
Right?
move the what?
Truck lift.
Lift out 5 years.
Oh, yes, and put the truck lift in, thank you, that was the third change. The highway to our truck lift, yes.
Okay, buildings, highway was an unknown, because she's gonna back into that. The
Right,
buildings go to 50, that's what I had for.
those are the changes that we, all right,
Yeah,
there may be a change on the bridge page, we haven't gotten to bridges yet. Once you've made those changes and it's in that spreadsheet out, can we meet as early as Tuesday?
We can meet at Tuesday
So we
at
can do that.
5:15 right here, right before the select board meeting, because
Okay.
most everyone comes to that anyways.
All right,
Does that work
So
for you?
we do that?
That works for me. Okay.
Tuesday at 5:15, all right,
Yeah.
let's do that. And one more item.
We'll see.
Let's assume, and I hope that with those few changes, we will say, okay, that's the plan that we're
We have
prepared to
to.
recommend. We have to, basically, we have to.
Yep.
And what I want to add to that, guys, is
You can.
at
select
that
it.
point, I will volunteer again this year to write the annual report.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And what we've been able to do, I just want to say it aloud for those who weren't here in previous years. What we've been able to do in the past is I would write it and share it by email. But we didn't find it necessary to have another meeting, just to say the report's okay.
Right.
I would share it by email and say, hey, if you got any comments, tell me.
Mhm.
In general, that's worked out fine at Pat. Is that okay with it? That, my point of bringing it up right now is that okay with everybody here
Yes.
today?
Good with me.
You know, okay, I'm gonna be sitting there with a gun to my head over Thanksgiving
We trust
weekend to
you.
do it at home.
We know it.
You
We
know,
appreciate your work.
but-
Trust me, we really.
I just wanna be
appreciate
sure that's.
You need the gun anyway, because you're gonna shoot the turkey.
Yeah, right.
Same gun.
it. Same gun, just different use.
Tuesday, what time did we say?
5:15.
5:15. All right.
Have to be done by
Let's
6.
look at the agenda.
That's no turkey.
Um, I guess
If you have your wife.
item 3 I had in the agenda was already.
Your wife should turn-
Hold the
and
turn.
then you.
No, why not?
We will.
What, oh, right.
We'll need to be. Okay,
I'm gonna try to.
You said bridges, but I don't know what
Bridges.
there's to do with bridges.
well, I want, bear with me one second on bridges, real quick, because there's been an update since last time. And it is a capital item, it's in the CIP plan, the bridges, Carrie Ann's gonna delete the column 2023, which was in there yesterday. she's got 2 bridges in 2024, namely transfer station. And Grist Mill Hill. The only thing I didn't quite understand coming in is why the town contribution isn't simply the difference between the total cost and the less state and federal,
The transfer station bridge
right?
is, as I recall, 100% ours.
Oh, that's not what this says. But Kelly Ann said, yesterday said it would cost $1.4 million. And
I'd have to look at the.
state
email.
and federal would be $1,120,000, and the town portion would be 200 and something.
Okay,
That's
so.
completely at odds with what you just
So
said.
the transfer station bridge must be then that we own 20% of the entire project.
Not all of it.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, okay,
Then that makes the math work.
Pretty much.
okay.
The Grist Mill Bridge. We own 20% only of the design,
Oh.
engineering costs.
All right,
And 100% of the construction is paid for by
great,
somebody else's money.
right,
And the Potato Road, probably further down the line,
it's you later.
is, I think, probably 20% design.
That's typical, right?
So bear with me,
So that, those are years down the road.
You know, I mean.
Well,
this one would
well, we
be
have,
next
we have
year.
the first 2 in next year, in 2024.
Yeah, that's,
And the transfer station says it's, the total cost is estimated at $1.4 million.
Yes.
Okay, and it says the state and federal is $1,120,000. Okay, the difference between those 2 numbers is like 280,000. Why doesn't it say that our portion is 280? Why does it say 226,903?
Mike Sampson's spreadsheet, and I don't
Oh,
know if the like
all
tracking
right.
all these little. numbers.
Then, so
So
here's,
it's the 20% number that we actually know.
I worked with Samson for the last 6 years. All you need to do, right there, for example, just stick with that one, the transfer station. If it's $1.4 million is the right, correct, reasonable estimate. If $1,120,000 is a reasonable estimate of the state and federal input, then the third number right there should be the difference between those 2, period. It should add up.
Yeah.
That make sense?
Well, the numbers that I
Okay.
sent out in the email were taken off DOT numbers dated August 23rd. something like that.
So that was our 20% of both pieces.
Yeah.
And that's what I made sure to.
So that's 20% of the entire project is 226. So then just do the math in reverse and that's the total cost. Is that right?
Either way, the 3 numbers should add up. Total cost, less state and federal, this is up here, so those 3 should add. Whichever way you
Well, I
go.
don't think that what our calculation should be different than what DOT put on their matrix.
Right.
So I don't care about Mike Sampson's formula.
Right, exactly, I agree.
What DOT.
I'm not saying it's Mike Simpson for me, I'm saying concept wise, a bridge is gonna cost X. The state and federal are gonna pay Y, and we're gonna pay Z, and those 3 you need to add up, that's all, I don't care about Mike Simpson's formula. To make common sense to the voters, we need to have it say A plus B equals C, that's all. And it doesn't right now, it's off by a little bit. And I would ask you to clean that up so that they add up directly, that's all.
Yep. Okay.
All right, good,
Look at it.
and that's all, that's all.
all right,
Um,
I'll move to adjourn.
Second,
Wait a minute, no, on bridges, the cap, no. I'm sorry, I don't.
Anybody
agree.
want to discuss?
And the
this?
reason is, once we fix those numbers above,
Yeah,
trust me, the capital reserve projection in the. Because we're gonna be going with the warrant article to put in, say, $50,000.
mhm.
The projection for how much we're gonna have in reserves after that is not correct. So that needs to be fixed. It's the only thing I told you about this one, change that formula. Yeah, we didn't talk about highway
Right.
trucks at all, this one, that formula on bridges. For capital reserve projection is not correct at all. And we'll need to know if we're gonna have enough money to pay our portion. And I think we will, but the formula is not correct. So that's the only other spreadsheet action, let me say, besides the 3 that you summarized earlier.
I've been trying to explain that there's other moving parts, so
Yeah,
like we've had the same conversation like 3 times at this point. So when I understand fully how we're gonna front the money for our portion of the bridges,
right.
I'll be able to accurately reflect it in a spreadsheet.
Well, he says he has the numbers in the DOT documents, right?
Yeah, but keep in mind, one of the things we're struggling with is we have to front this money.
Right,
We get reimbursed.
right.
So we may only be up for 20% of the design cost, but we have to pay 100%.
We need to front it.
of
I
it.
understand, that's a problem, yeah, yeah.
And so we need to construct a mechanism to put that money aside somehow. In the slush of our cash that we're having hanging
Right.
around.
If I read this right, we have 196,000 in reserve to help with that. Plus, we're gonna put in another 50, so that would give us $250,000 that we could use to front those costs, right?
Again, I have to look back at the DOT.
Well, would you and Carrie just get on the same page on that? And-
That's all,
That's
yeah.
all.
I just saying three things, numbers above. because
And that
that-
page of you.
And capital reserve projection calculation does not look correct, so maybe you two of you look at it together, we can fix it. Okay, that's it, that's the last item that I have.
All in favor?
Oh, we had a motion, I had to.
Oh, yeah, I made a motion and.
So-
I'll second it.
Let me write it down. But I killed it because we had another item we had to discuss. Bridget,
All right, and we're all gonna agree that those are the only things we're asking Carrie Ann to do the
Correct.
next Tuesday.
The three you mentioned before, and the bridges.
Also very busy with.
To this committee.
I don't know, I kind of feel like the
It shouldn't be-
secretary or the chair of the committee should just